Good afternoon. Please continue eating. Anyone who has thought they had to be polite and stop, please continue. I can talk over the sound of knives and forks, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I thought it was very fascinating when we started this morning with a talk by a lawyer from our local utility. About 2 weeks ago, I was in a room about this large talking to about 200 of the utility lawyers in the state of Texas. And my message to them was that they need to get on the ball, because their idea of emerging technology is not the same idea of emerging technology that the technologists have that are out here to change the world. And we pointed out that how their regulations get in the way of technology and how technology makes regulations obsolete. So, and the bottom line was we need to work together so that we can make the whole country more competitive. And I received a very warm welcome from them with that message, and I was pleased to see that the lawyer turned technologist got a very warm welcome this morning from you for his message that says that their utility is going to move forward on things like electric vehicles. The other thing that I find ironic standing here before you today is that yesterday I stood in front of a group to explain to them the steps that had to be taken for algae to be able to provide the transportation fuel in the future. So I am representing both the people who believe that you can make another liquid fuel that can make things work, and the people who believe that electricity are going to make things work. And how can I do this and maintain my integrity? The way I look at it is that I'm old enough to remember when Betamax was the only way you were ever going to record a movie. And VHS took them over, and they're all gone now. And so my feeling is that what we really need to do is to work on all of these technologies, make all of the technologies as good as they can be, and let the market choose. That way, in that way, we don't prejudge what the ultimate technology is going to be, because by not investing and not in the R&D and not putting our best minds and our best efforts forward in making the future to be what we envision it can be. I have to admit that there is one reason why I really like the electric vehicle, and that has to do with a student project that we had at the university about a year and a half ago, in which the students were looking at some of the impacts of electric vehicles on anything they could think of, basically. And one of them chose to use our models that we have on what causes smog. You may not believe this, but Austin has smog, Houston has smog. It's not just a Los Angeles problem, it's also a Texas problem. And we were looking at how can what would an electric vehicle do to smog? And they found that if everybody could drive an electric vehicle to work, it doesn't matter what you do after you get there. If you can take the exhaust fumes out of the air before about 9 o'clock in the morning, you don't form the smog because you don't have the pollution there at the beginning when the sun comes up. And so you've done a wonderful job of removing smog just by running off a battery from your house to your job in the morning. You can run gasoline coming home at night, you won't cause smog. You may cause all kinds of other things, but the smog goes away. So I really like that, and that's something nothing else can beat. You can get rid of smog by going to work on a battery. The first point I want to make, and although I really like the electric cars, the other study that I want to point out is the one that made me recognize that the transition from where we are today to wherever we're going to be is going to be slow and it's going to be expensive. We did some work for the Environmental Protection Agency looking at some of the alternative fuels and looking at electric vehicles, and as a touch point, as a way of calibrating ourselves, we had one of the students do a fairly exhaustive study on what it took to change from leaded to unleaded gasoline in the United States. We figured that was a fairly simple process. It's going to be cheap, it's going to be quick, but we're probably not going to be able to work much faster than that. Well, it took 18 years and about $5 billion. to change from leaded to unleaded gasoline in the United States. So we recognize that all fuel transitions are going to be slow. And we need to keep that in mind as we start making the promises and making the expectations. This is going to take time, and it's going to cost a lot of money. The other reason that I have policy concerns over the shift to electric vehicles is that any kind of large technology shift has winners and losers. And that was brought home to me very, very strongly by an NPR report that I heard a couple of weeks ago. It turns out the Corn Belt is doing very well, thank you. If you go drive up to the gas pump, it says this gasoline contains 10% ethanol. Well, guess what? 10% ethanol means that farms that were selling for $2,000 an acre in the mid-90s are now selling for $9,000 an acre. It means that they're planting more corn than they've ever planted before, they're charging more for it, and they're making more profit. So people in Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, and all the states that border that don't see a real financial advantage for them to moving away from ethanol. And so we have a structure in place that you've got a whole lot of people who sit at home and vote when the public policies don't go the way they want, who see that what we have now is going in the right direction for them. So we're going to have to recognize that there are going to be people who are being disadvantaged in this situation. We see the same thing, hypothetically you see the same thing in your local service stations. However, one could make an argument that maybe we ought to be putting charging stations where service stations are today, and we could keep those people in business and not develop a set of opponents to electrification also. So there are public policy issues. These are all going to have to be worked through. That going from leaded to unleaded gasoline had winners and losers. That's one of the reasons it took 18 years. People aren't going to quickly give up their money to say, yes, I think you should have the money rather than me. That's not an altruistic vision that most of us have. And so it's going to take some time to make that adjustment to go forward. That being said, I do want to point out that we are in the laboratory, my laboratory at the university, we are working very diligently on a whole bunch of hybrid applications. And my view of what the university should do, having come here after working nearly 30 years in Washington, D.C. and retiring to the university and having the time of my life. I mean, I welcome you all to Texas. This is a great place to live. I got 10 years younger when I moved here from Washington, D.C. But what happens is the university gives you the opportunity to find out where the edge is. I can find out how a high performance or extreme performance I can get out of hybrid vehicles, and that makes it safe for the manufacturers to work inside that fence. And we have significant programs in a wide range of areas. We look at cars. No, we don't stop. We look at trucks. We look at buses. We've worked on utility vehicles. We've looked at boats. The one thing that we haven't been able to look at are automobiles. And it turns out, in my time here, I've just been shaking my head, there is a firm belief, I think, everywhere in the United States that if you're going to be a university working on an automobile, you need to be either in Michigan or in California. Trucks are okay for Texas, buses are okay for Texas, but not passenger cars. So we haven't done a passenger car, but we've done lots of other vehicles, and we have lots of them that are working in our area. And I was also pleased to see that when Formula One decided they were going to go hybrid, they put about 6 staff months worth of people in our laboratory to understand some of the technologies that we had so that they could incorporate those into Formula One. So it's not a passenger car, it's a race car, but it's a car. So that's the one car that we hang on to. The kind of work that we're doing is that we're taking a suspension from a vehicle, for example, tearing out the old mechanical suspension and putting in an electrical one. And in doing so, we double the carrying capacity. We increase the fuel economy over rough roads by about 20%. And we reduce the shock and vibration by about a factor of 10. You just ask, why would you want to do that? Well, one reason you'd want to do that is because the U.S. military put these on Humvees and they tested them, and using their models and their data, they predicted that instead of paying $7.50 a mile to own a Humvee, you pay something like $3.10 a mile to own a Humvee. So the cost of ownership drops about in half. Another big application, we think, is in the emerging markets around the world, where their economy depends upon trucks, where they can't afford what we used to be able to afford, which is millions of dollars a mile to build great big good highways. You need to have a truck that can carry more, that brakes less, and has better fuel economy. And that's what this suspension permits things to do. We build hybrid vehicles. We have a fuel cell, a battery-powered bus with fuel cell augmentation. We've also built utility vehicles just on fuel cells, and those are kind of cool. My first thought was, why would you want to take a little utility vehicle and just put a fuel cell in it? And the reason is, it makes a wonderful power plant on wheels. You don't consider it a vehicle anymore. You can drive it anywhere you want. You can plug anything you want into it. You can work anywhere. You can put it indoors with no pollution, and you end up with a vehicle that is its own power plant. You can run your own power tools off of it, and at the end of the day, you take it home and you fill it up with hydrogen again. So it's a pretty cool vehicle. Yeah, of course, you have, and the people who are really fascinated by it, of course, are the ones that have large warehouses and they run hydrogen-powered, fuel cell-powered forklifts already. And they'd like to be able to run other vehicles through there without having to keep the doors open to keep the pollution down. And these utility vehicles are pretty cool. So those are the kind of activities that we're working on right now. But the reason that I had come here is to talk to you about Pecan Street. And those of you who were in the meetings this morning have heard a little bit about Pecan Street already. Pecan Street is a research project that we are conducting here in Austin, Texas. The location is very nice for us. It's sort of it's a convergence of good things at the same time. We had an old airport. We were going to build a new airport. The city bracked our Air Force base. And so the airport that any of you landed in that came in by plane is the old Air Force base that used to be in Austin. We don't have an Air Force base anymore, but we now have a new airport. The question was, what do we do with the in-town airport? And we decided to do, what most cities tend to do, is let's make a new town, a mixed-use development. Let's have a planned community so that we have good retail and businesses, doctor's offices, and people living there. And oh, by the way, let's make it really energy efficient. So we'll attract people who really want to live in an energy efficient environment. So we had that process going on. At the same time, we had in the United States programs like Smart Grid arising, where you had a whole lot of people trying to understand how to give consumers better choice in their use of electricity. And you have things like electric vehicles coming in that says, gee, we can plug different things into the system and do different things to the utilities. And you had things like energy storage and solar photovoltaics coming in. And the question comes in, how does all of this play well together? What we did in the Pecan Street project is we've taken a somewhat different view than most, in that we said, you know, the people who know how these are going to play well together are the people who are going to use them. The utilities can guess at what people want. The regulators can guess at what people want. The people making consumer products to put in their home to control their loads will guess at what people want. But it's the people who are going to make the choices. So why don't we do a people-centric, a consumer-centric experiment? Why don't we set up an experiment where we work with the homeowners and we try to find out from them what it is that makes sense for them, what it is they want to do, what capabilities they want, what they want to have pre-bundled, who they want to control, who they want to have control of what happens inside their house, and try to use this as a living laboratory to see what they like and what they don't like and how they react to various things. That is why we said, you may have picked up this morning if you were at the talk, that the Pecan Street project is a 501(c)(3). And it's because we want to have this community with the community. We want to be able to work together, and if a utility itself goes in, or if a marketer for consumer products itself goes in, you get with it is hard to get the consumers to get away from their bias that says, oh, they're just trying to get me to do X, Y, or Z. And with the 501(c), where we bring in the telecommunication companies, we bring in the utilities, we bring in the consumer products people, we bring in the solar panel suppliers, we bring in the battery suppliers, we bring in the electric vehicle suppliers, and we say we're going to have all of these people in there, but what we want to do as the people who are running the 501(c), we want to work with you and find out what works for you, and then we'll tell those people what it is you want. So one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to get a good cooperation with the electric car buyers and put charging stations in a whole bunch of houses right next to each other, of people having work in various parts of the town, but who have the same general environment that they're working in, and to try to understand how they want to do charging differently. As you've seen over and over in the talks this morning, if you think that people are going to charge randomly overnight, we've got a wonderful opportunity to just fill up the valley that we had at night and use and sell electricity all night long. If you believe that people have been jaundiced by the fact that sometimes their cell phone, they've forgotten to recharge it and they didn't have it when they needed it, and but on the cell phone you can just plug it in and call. On your car, if you suddenly wake up at 10:30 at night because you have to run over to the Walgreens to pick up medicine for your kid, and you forgot, and your car hasn't charged yet, you may be in real trouble. And so they may want to all charge immediately when they come in, just to make sure that this is okay. Or maybe not. We don't know. We're all guessing. And so what we want to do is is find out what the consumers really want to do. And then find out, we've heard there can be a huge cost in retrofitting the distribution transformers, because if everybody wants to do distribution transformers at the same time, you will start overloading distribution transformers. It's actually even a bit more insidious than that. What you're definitely going to do by putting more charging in is you're going to heat them up, and if you heat them up, and if you do it slowly enough and don't heat them up too much, all you're going to do is cut their life in half. So you're not going to plug your car in and suddenly your transformer is going to blow up and call the utility to replace your transformer. What's going to happen is throughout the neighborhoods where the transformers are supposed to last 20, 30, 40 years, they're going to last 5, 10, 15 years. But you won't know that for 5, 10, 15 years. So what we want to do is find out how people really want to do charging, do the modeling simulation to see how that really affects the transformers, and then come in and find out, and then be able to feed that information back to the utilities, for example, to say this is, as you start thinking about what makes a difference to people, these are the things that make a difference, and they are perfectly happy to let you control A, B, and C, but they are never going to let you control X, Y, and Z in their lives. And that's the kind of information that we hope to get out of this experiment, to help utilities make better decisions, so we can really get the right infrastructure in at the right time, so that we can have electric vehicles succeed in the future. If we end up with vehicle manufacturers guessing what the consumer wants, and utilities making a different guess at what the consumers want, and the consumers don't quite want either one of those, there can be an answer for what the consumers want, but everybody has missed it by making their assumptions. And obviously the car companies are very used to looking at consumer groups and saying, okay, exactly how do you want this done? That is not a standard practice for the electric utilities today. They have not been in the business of saying, what color do you want your electricity today? The electricity is electricity, and you buy what they sell. To a very good approximation. And for years and years they were regulated monopoly, and that was their job, is to providing you safe, reliable electricity every day at the lowest price possible. They're now into a competitive market with a change in the loads, and there's going to be a very different set as you go, and particularly go into smart grid, where you assume that consumers are going to want to make choices on their own. Then you have to understand what choices they're comfortable with. I mean, realistically, my expectation is very few customers are going to want to make very many choices very often. I mean, I think of my mother. She's 91 and she still uses her computer. But if I told her that she had to make decisions on exactly how much electricity she wants to use every day, it ain't going to happen. What she might do is sign up for a plan so that somebody else can, and they guarantee to minimize her usage. And that might be okay. Now, I might want to see if I could play with mine and outwit the power company and come in with half the power, that half the cost of my next door neighbor. But I think I'm unusual. I think the vast majority of the people in the United States have become very accustomed to having a meter that costs $50 that plugs in and gives them an electric bill that they can complain a little bit about, but they can use what they want when they want and don't have to think about it. Our life is complicated enough right now of all the things we have to think about. And the idea of the benefit that we're going to get from adding this complexity is going to be very hard to understand and get our arms around. Because I don't think there's anyone in this room who actually thinks that the cost of electricity is going to go down. What we're going to do by doing this is having the cost of electricity go up somewhat more slowly than it would if we hadn't come in with some of the smart grid ideas. And it's really hard to sell the idea that, believe me, your bill would have been even more expensive had we not done this. And so we have to really get the consumers on board. We really have to get people thinking together about how we can solve this problem as a nation and look at it as a global problem, not just how do I plug in my car, but how do I make the United States work? How do I work this as a system so that we're all very comfortable with how the system works? And as I look at this on a global sense and on a system sense, I want to take a brief aside here for all of you who are IEEE members. As some of you know, I have spent the last 2 years as a member of the board of directors of the IEEE. And when my term was over, I should have retired and come back to Austin and been happy. But I accepted what I knew was not a small job, but I think it's a very important job. And that's the job of looking at, well, it's called Chairman of the Future Directions Committee, but that doesn't mean anything. What the charge is I've got to figure out, I have to help the IEEE figure out, work with you folks to help the IEEE figure out how we can get new technologies into the IEEE. And I say that in that if you think about that question for a minute, it becomes a very interesting question. If a technology has sense enough to evolve completely within one of the pre-existing structures of the IEEE, it's really easy. Oh, this is an IEEE USA problem, it handles it. Oh, this is a Power and Energy Society problem, it handles it. Those kinds are very easy. If it has sense enough to evolve so it doesn't overlap anything, it's easy. We just form a new organization and that takes care of it. Where we have real difficulty is something like electric vehicles, where there's something like 10 tab societies that have very legitimate reasons why they're critically involved in electric vehicles. We have IEEE USA because there's a tremendous amount of public policy. We have MGA because there's jobs and people in those areas. We have the Standards Association because this is the area rife with standards. And therefore everybody owns it and nobody owns it. And what we're trying to do over the next year is to find ways that things like electric vehicles and like smart grid can grow into the IEEE in a way that everybody owns it and moves it forward, instead of nobody owning it but making sure that the other guy can't own it either. So well, I talked first about the global problem that we have. We also have a very local problem within IEEE, and I hope IEEE can solve its local problems fast enough to help to be a force of good to help the more global problems. So what I'd like to do is close there, pointing out that I really do think that electric vehicles are going to play a large role in the future of the United States. I'm not sure they will be I'm not sure they're going to be the only solution, but I think they're going to be an important solution over the next decade. I'm very happy to be working to help make that true. One of the taglines of the University of Texas is that what happens here changes the world. And I'm really happy to be working in the area of electric and hybrid vehicles, and because I think it does give us a real chance of changing the world. And I wish you all good luck, and thank you.